Who says June and July are a dead period for the NFL? Three separate storylines to dive into, including a new offensive tackle for the Miami Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, NFL staff writer for A to Z Sports, and welcome to the Thursday, June 18th edition of Locked On Dolphins, which is brought to you by Odoo. Great organizations win because operations matter, and that's why you should get Odoo. Try for free at odoo.com/lockedon. That's odoo.com/lockedon. Today on the show, some news on the Brendan Sorsby Pro Day front, some speculation from a friend of mine about potential uniform updates for the Miami Dolphins, and a new offensive tackle on their roster. So I don't know if we just didn't get the memo that it's supposed to be the dead period and there's not a bunch of things to talk about, but I got a bunch of things to talk about. So we'll start with the Dolphins signing that was announced yesterday. If you remember, at the beginning of the week, they released Keon Smith and with an injury designation released Carter Warren, and they added Major Burns, the safety from the UFL. Well, they went back to the UFL pipeline for another transaction yesterday, and because they released two offensive linemen, not really a big surprise that they went offensive line with one of those roster spots that was made available. So it's former Frostburg State and Maryland Terrapin offensive tackle Gottlieb Ayedze is the signing for the Dolphins. Most recently played for the Houston Gamblers in the UFL, which is the same team that Major Burns played with. Here's what I can tell you about Gottlieb. And I have 5 talking points that I put together for a story last night for A to Z Sports, but I think it kind of paints a nice picture of like how we've gotten to this point with ADs being available to sign and the Dolphins being a player who signed. He played 4 years at Frostburg State, was a 3-time first-team All-MEC selection, which is the conference that Frostburg State plays in. And then for his final season in college, he transferred and played for the Maryland Terrapins. I know Pro Football Focus had him graded as one of the better pass-protecting offensive tackles in college football. I don't put too much stock into the actual grades. And I went to look up like the advanced metrics to figure out where what the pressure rates were and how many pressures he gave up. And all that stuff's gone because PFF is private equity and acquired now. So the things that used to work don't quite work the way they used to. I digress. As a result of his play with the Terrapins, he was selected for the 2024 East-West Shrine Bowl. And there he checked in over 80 inches on the wingspan. So he was 6'4", 316 with over 80-inch wingspan. That is verifiably offensive tackle size for the NFL game. So if you're worried about, being light at tackle or not having enough mass, I think he's listed at 309 on the Gamblers roster, but he's 316, and then he was 314 at the NFL Combine. I make note of the wingspan, though, because that has become such a big talking point. He had 33-inch arms, so it's not like he was short, but he didn't have prototypical length. But I have, as we've continued to do evaluations and learn about the game, I tend to value wingspan more than just the arm length, because if you're a two-hand puncher, like you're only as long as your chest and shoulder width is going to allow you to be, right? Whereas if you have big, broad shoulders, it naturally widens and can, whatever your midline is, if you've got wide shoulders, you can extend and have a larger influence, even if you don't have 34.5-inch arms, right? So Will Campbell, if you remember the top pick for the Patriots last year, who played left tackle, and he's a big, like, launching point for a lot of the debates around tackle length in the NFL. He was less than 77 and a half inches on his wingspan. So being over 80, you're kind of comfortably out of that uncomfortable conversation about, are you long enough to play tackle in the NFL? At the NFL Combine, we mentioned his weight. There's some explosiveness that showed up in the testing. 89th percentile for the 40-yard dash. Don't care too much about the 40 itself, and I'm more interested in what the first 10 looks like. I couldn't find the 10-yard split, but 87th percentile in the standing broad jump. So we're 314, 316. 89th percentile was 112 inches, which is 9 feet 4 inches. That's a big time jump for a big man. Like, that's a lot of lower body explosiveness. So for an offense that's looking to have mass but wants to still be able to explode off the football and run off the ball, as they say, that's the talking point, right? Having this kind of short area twitch and lower body explosiveness can make you a fit. I am not saying that ADs is going to end up being on the roster and could be a long-term starter. I'm not saying anything like that. But I'm seeing how the pieces of him fit within the puzzle of what are the things that the Dolphins are looking for, or we perceive them to be looking for, right? He went undrafted in 2024, spent the summer on the Eagles' offseason roster, was released, and some of that might be because the Eagles had great tackle depth between what they had with it was Jordan Mailata and Lane Johnson are the starters, and then was it Fred Johnson is kind of their like de facto can't quit him tackle depth guy. And this was in 24, not in 25. And then he lands on the Raiders practice squad and is on the Raiders practice squad the entirety of the 2024 regular season. Then gets signed to a futures contract to stay with the Raiders, and it was carried through the preseason in 2025. He was released in 2025 off the Raiders practice or expanded roster, did not make another team until he got to the UFL. He was a first team, or he was all UFL selection for his play in 2026 in the spring. So he played very, very well. It's kind of odd to see a guy, especially because, right, so he's in Philly, right? And it doesn't work out. He goes to Philly, and he goes to Las Vegas. That offensive line was catastrophically bad last year. So if you're a young, underdeveloped player, like he played 4 of his 5 years at Frostburg State, what's the pathway for success look like for Gottlieb? It's that the Raiders were a tire fire, which they verifiably were with Pete Carroll last year and Chip Kelly running the offense or whatever. Like, it was a disaster. So if they're uncohesive up front, a raw, underdeveloped player who had 4 months working with the Eagles, it's not enough time to develop after being at Frostburg State for 4 of your 5 seasons of college play, right? So that's the pathway for me, is just he didn't land with another team because the tape from the Raiders preseason looked as bad as it did because the Raiders were a tire fire, which the Raiders were a tire fire. And then he goes to the UFL, and he's an all UFL selection. So physical ability is there, showed something in an environment that was not tire fire 2025 Raiders offense. Let's see. Why not, right? I have one more talking point. We'll get to that on the other side of the break. Make sure you guys stick with us. Throughout the NHL finals, every shift matters. Every moment is intense, and everything comes down to execution when pressure is at its highest. And just like athletes want to be ready to perform when the puck drops, a lot of guys want the same sense of readiness and confidence in their own lives too. That's where Rugiet comes in. Rugiet offers modern performance-focused treatments designed to help you be ready when it matters. Their top option, Rugiet Ready, is a fast-acting, clinically formulated treatment that comes in a simple mint and dissolves under your tongue. It's designed for convenience with fast absorption and effects that can begin in about 15 minutes and may last up to 36 hours. They also offer Go Long, which is formulated for both support and control for longer lasting needs. It's all about helping guys feel prepared and confident and in control. Head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnNHL Get 15% off your ED treatment. That's rugiet.com/LockedOnNHL for 15% off. Rugiet, performance medicine for men. Running a business shouldn't feel like you're trying to connect a bunch of systems that were never designed to work together. That's kind of what the Raiders' offensive line looked like last year. One app for accounting, another for inventory, another for sales, and somehow none of them seemed to talk to each other, just like the Raiders' 5 offensive linemen did last year. That's where Odoo comes in. Odoo is an all-in-one business management software that brings every part of your business together in one powerful platform. From sales and accounting to inventory and marketing, everything works in one place, helping your team move faster, stay organized, and focused on growing the business instead of just managing software. The best organizations know that success isn't just about talent. It's about having everyone working towards the same goal, unlike the Raiders' 2025 offensive line. That's true in sports just like it is in business. Great organizations win because operations matter. That's why you should get Odoo. Try for free at odoo.com/lockedon. That's odoo.com/lockedon. My final talking point is not a Las Vegas Raiders offensive line talking point from 2025. They may be good this year. Who knows? We'll find out week 1. There is one diehard Raiders fan, and I want you to know I see you. I can't invest my time to talk back to you. But he's been talking smack for 2 weeks about week 1 already, Raiders fan. And more power to you, brother. I hope you're well. Best of luck this summer. Best of luck in week 1, and we'll see what happens. How's that? The last thing that I had for Gottlieb before we get to him signing in Miami. He worked out with the Patriots reportedly earlier this week. That's always cool, right? Division rival shows some interest in a guy. You jump on it, get the deal signed. So anytime you can rug pull the Patriots is a good day, as far as I'm concerned. We'll see what ADs is able to do. I do think, kind of Carter Warren hasn't been a successful NFL player. Keon Smith, the Dolphins last year tried to make him a guard when he was unequivocally and unquestionably, based on the film, every opportunity you had to watch him play at guard, not a guard. They still tried to play him at guard. But the tackle depth behind Jamari Salyer is something to be skeptical about. Charlie Heck, skeptical there based on the play. Marquise Cox, Kevin Klein. There's a chance Gottlieb comes in, and I don't think he beats out Jamari Salyer, and I don't think he beats out Charlie Heck because Charlie Heck's got experience with Bobby Slowick. We mentioned yesterday Salyer doesn't have guarantees in his salary, and neither does Charlie Heck, but I still think both of those guys with their experience are going to have a pretty firm leg up. But if you go starting 5, Jamari Salyer, probably now Charlie Heck is I don't want to say a shoe-in. Like there's players that might shake loose that they would be interested in having instead of Charlie Heck. Maybe Charlie Heck does get beat out by Gottlieb in a competition because there's some long-term ceiling and appeal there as compared to Heck, who is turns 30 in November. Maybe. It's hard to say, right? But I think that's what I would tab the 4 tackles at right now. Paul, Jackson, Salyer, Heck, with Proctor also having tackle ability, and Jonas Savaitinai also having tackle flexibility based on their college tape. So that's the state of affairs at offensive tackle for the Dolphins now after moving on from Keon Smith and Carter Warren. The next thing I have today is really interesting. If you don't know Zach Cohen, he works for FanDuel now. He went to UF for journalism. We worked together at Draft Network for a short period of time, but I got to know Zach, and Zach's a great dude. And Zach also just so happens to be a Dolphins fan. And he's kind of on the forefront of like a lot of uniform stuff. He's gotten invited to uniform reveals, and he was at the forefront of everything that the Dolphins were doing and the rest of the teams that were getting the rivalry uniforms last year. Zach put something out yesterday that I want to acknowledge. I want to just shout Zach out for the market that he's found for himself, because I think he's doing a wonderful job. This is not a report, but this is informed speculation based on some details of how the uniform process works. I cannot state it enough. And usually I always joke about I should make a disclaimer at some point, and I don't make it until halfway through. So you've already heard half of what I have to say before I make the disclaimer. I'm making it up front. This is not a report. Informed speculation. And I'm going to paraphrase because I want to make sure that Zach, I don't just sit here and read a bunch of talking points off of what he has put together. But Fanatics put out a new stitched jersey for the teams for this year. So a new retail item. And 2 teams were not included amongst the franchises that got stitched uniforms as a new product. And among those 2 teams was the Miami Dolphins. So the Dolphins, you cannot get a stitched Fanatics Dolphins jersey right now. And Zach, with what his familiarity is with kind of the uniform process and how they went about getting their rivalry uniforms, which ended up being like the black, but they're not black. They're deep sea blue. And I don't know. I didn't buy one. So you're going to have to tell me if you think it's black or blue. It's like that gold and white and black and blue dress, right? Like everybody looks at it different. Half of you tell me it's black. Half of you tell me that it's blue. I don't know. I didn't see him in person either. Depending on the lighting, I could see the blue, but I mostly do see black. But during their exploration process, Zach had heard that, there was some interest in an orange jersey as well. It's something that he discloses in talking through this big info drop that he has about the uniforms. He says teams have work on uniform designs for multiple years. He said that his talks and videos with the Falcons and Ravens confirmed that, and he got invited to the Ravens uniform release party. So, like, he's talked to some folks inside some teams. The Dolphins, if they get new uniforms, that would be a welcomed change for me. I do think the product looks a little, it's clean, it's sleek, it's modernized, it's not legacy, and I don't need it to be legacy. Like, I know there's the Make the Throwbacks permanent Twitter account that tweets at every piece of Dolphins content that gets posted on social media and is just demanding that the throwbacks get made permanent. I don't need it to be that, but I do think this look can afford to be freshened up. So Zach makes sure to state that he's not confirming anything, but based on those in the distribution and uniform industries and those that are privy to the facts on how this process plays out, Zach has a working theory that this could be an indicator that the Dolphins may be intending on doing something new with uniforms. Not a report, informed speculation. That is it. So, Zach, I do want to read this part of it. We know how long the process for uniforms is. There's been multiple reports and whispers within the Saints organization about new uniform and consideration possible changes. The Saints are the other team that did not get a stitched. Back in April 2025, I first reported the Dolphins having internal and external interest in a dark uniform. They also had an interest in an orange uniform. Both teams have had some whispers, some reported discussions about new uniforms. I feel like the Dolphins and Saints fans have been talking about new uniforms for a while. Maybe the organizations are listening. Could be a moot point. Maybe the stitched uniforms drop. But nevertheless, something to watch. And what better for the third week in June than some watch out for uniform talk? See if you end up getting your hands on stitched uniforms. If that's the case, maybe that is an indicator that this was just a logistics issue. Who knows? But I will be watching for it for sure. Brendan Sorsby. I'm not going to get into should the Dolphins bid for yet another time. I've kind of made my thoughts clear on that between what I do here on Locked On Dolphins and stories that I've written for A to Z Sports, yes, I believe the Dolphins should be prepared to file a bid, a responsible bid, probably fourth or fifth round. Fourth if you're very comfortable with the information, fifth if you're not, because you have 2 fifth-round picks because of the Jalen Ramsey deal. And, you're not trying to panic outbid everybody for Sorsby's services, but there's enough there from a talent perspective and John Eric Sullivan's words and talking about their quarterback philosophy that I think it would be an appropriate thing to do instead of just resting on your laurels because you've signed Malik Willis. And I recognize that there's risk there, and I know the sanctity of the game is in question with what has been reported, right? But he's going to roll on. He's scheduled for a pro day on June 10th, which is less than a month away. And there was a factoid there that impacts the Dolphins and everybody else. We're going to talk about that next. Stick with us. Workplace chaos can show up fast. The problem is that finding the right candidate can take a lot more time than most businesses can actually afford. That's where Indeed Sponsored Jobs comes in. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you reach candidates who actually fit what you're looking for based on skills, experience, and location. Finding the right person can make all the difference, whether that's building a business or building a winning team. So spend less time on your business searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all of your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now. Support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on the program. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions do apply. If you need to hire, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. So this came courtesy of Pete Thamel, the college football senior insider for ESPN, by way of the Pat McAfee show. I expect all 32 teams to go to this Brendan Sorsby Pro Day. I talked to his agent today, and he said it's more about how many people these teams are going to send. So it's a quarterback. Everybody does their due diligence. Cool, right? Like I would not expect anybody to. There's one player available in the part of the year where your college staff got nothing to do other than foundational reports and background information for the year ahead. Yeah, I'm going to take a day and I'm going to put some folks on a plane and I'm going to fly to South Lake, Texas and watch the throwing session and try to talk to some people around the program, right? Like or talk to some people around his camp, I should say, because it's not at Texas Tech and it's not at Cincinnati for reasons of why the supplemental draft is usually a pretty rare thing as a whole. It requires a certain level of extenuating circumstances and or bad decisions, which is where Sorsby ends up with some of his off the field decision making as far as the betting and the gambling addiction that he has. Right? It's a very morally gray and uncomfortable place to be as far as placing bets on games where you are a participant in the game. And I know he didn't bet on any games that he was physically himself playing in, but everybody's got their own response to that, right? And I try to leave room for everybody to have their own personal beliefs in amidst our conversations. But there's the bigger part of the Sorsby conversation right now that I think is notable. And Dane Brugler, who's for The Athletic and is one of the best in the draft space, kind of got into this the other day. I think Danny Cannell touched on it too. Brendan Sorsby, that you're hearing a lot of talk on the network television about Brendan Sorsby and how he would have been a first-round pick. I think Brendan Sorsby has first-round physical ability. He did not have first-round tape last year. And if he did have first-round tape last year, he'd probably come out in that quarterback class last year, right? Now, first-round traits, absolutely. If you want to describe him as having first-round tapes, but the consistency, the footwork, the decision-making, the accuracy, there's enough inconsistency with all of it that he would have been a very high variance selection in this year's draft, which is why he went back to school. Dane Brugler said he got third-round feedback from the NFL Advisory Committee, with the chance, obviously, to leap. And it's not at all unforeseen for guys that get day 3 grades by the Advisory Committee to end up being first-round players if they go back and have a successful final season in college. But you're hearing first-round guy, maybe second round with the silent auction style of the supplemental draft. I don't buy it. I don't buy that that's going to be the cost because of him having a gambling addiction that required him to get treatment for and the risks involved with that and how that can impact the league and the game, because of the potential suspension that he may need to carry for his off-field decision-making and that behavior that has created this whole mess. The league will make an assessment, and if you're bringing him in the middle of July, realistically speaking, he's probably not going to be prepared to play for you at least until the end of the season. So it's more of a long-term play as compared to a get out of jail free or quarterback situation is bad play. And because of what the film looked like. And we've seen this time and time again, whether it's contract reporting or the Game of Thrones chaos is a ladder information game that was happening with the Dolphins last year with McDaniel and Tua and their reports of what McDaniel was having to go through, and McDaniel being on the hot seat, or McDaniel saying that he was going to be a part of the GM search. And in reality, the more information comes out, it's like, well, he's not sitting in on the interviews. He's not providing names. So how is he involved? And it was like some sly one-off comment that was like, oh, if they ask me, I'll tell them what I think. And the way that the information was presented was Mike McDaniel's safe. He's going to be a part of the GM search. The information game is afoot. And you can't tell me that a guy who would have been a slam dunk first-round pick chose to go back to school for a $5 million NIL in that quarterback class last year if he was a slam dunk first-round pick at quarterback. I like Brendan Sorsby. I like the traits a lot. But if you're saying first-round guy, maybe a second-round guy, ask yourself the question, who benefits from everybody publicly believing that Brendan Sorsby is going to cost a second-round pick, especially in a silent auction? I don't think it's too hard to figure out where the push is coming from. And the guys at the top of the food chain on the information game, they talk directly to those people. And I don't think they're being disingenuous, but I believe they're reporting and discussing the things that they're being told. And your platform can be a blessing and a curse as far as exposure. Just like the examples that we provided just for the Dolphins last year with the information game. So count me among those who does not believe that Brendan Sorsby will command, already being mostly third-round feedback from teams per Dane Brugler. Has played no football since, now has a gambling addiction and a potential suspension lingering over his head, and is 3 months behind the 8 ball coming into his rookie season. Count me among the teams that think that guy's stock didn't go up. Probably went down. So we'll see what happens. Right? We have less than a month until the pro day. Sounds like the Dolphins will be there per Peter Thamel saying that all 32 teams are expected to be there. And the question is instead who the Dolphins would choose to bring, although there's no confirmation. And we won't get confirmation until that day, right? June 10th. That's it for me here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. Appreciate you all for checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your Thursday. And I'll be back to talk to you all again soon. Fins up.